I'm going to play a video for you. I'm going to circle something that I find very interesting, and I want to see if you pick up on it. And then we're going to talk about it.
States airstrike at girls' elementary school and kill 175 people?
Not that we know of, Sean, and the Department of War is investigating this matter, and I would just tell you very strongly, the United States of America does not target civilians, unlike the rogue Iranian regime that targets civilians, that kills children, that has killed thousands of their own people in the past several weeks, and uses propaganda quite effectively, and unfortunately many people in this room have fallen for that propaganda. So I would caution you from pointing the finger at the United States of America when it comes to targeting civilians, because that's not something that these armed forces do.
That was the gatekeeper of the pedo elite, Karoline Levitt, the spokesperson for the White House for the Trump admin, talking about propaganda. Now I want to ask you, do you see the irony? Do you see the propaganda in real time? I circled the word truth because it's important to note that while the word is displayed on the screen, right, text truth for more information about the White House or from the White House, that's a visual cue. So it's intended for, while she's speaking, your eyes are seeing the physical word truth appear before you. And so, to the untrained eye, to people who are largely uneducated and ignorant, right? You know who I'm talking about. To those people, the brain links the speech with the physical cue. And so, she could say anything at all. And whoever's watching and is that untrained and that ignorant would virtually presume whatever was being said is true. Now, obviously, it's not just because that physical word appears on the screen. Quite clearly, there are other ways to, generate propaganda and brainwash people just in words alone. The lie itself can be very convincing unless you analyze it, right? Because what her argument is that the USA doesn't bomb civilians. Of course they don't. We're the moral good guys, right? We're the ones trying to save the world. It's just unfortunate that we have to continuously bomb everybody all the time and enact these regime changes which cause a domino effect of more chaos and more chaos and more chaos. You can't blame us for wanting to introduce civility through acts of barbarism, can you? I mean, that's America's foreign policy in a nutshell, right? But just on that claim that Iranian media is lying about the explosion, right, that killed all of those schoolgirls in Minab in Iran, that strike took place in the initial attacks by the USA and Israel, right? That was a surprise attack. That would mean that Iran would have to attack themselves before any instigation was made clear by Israel or the United States, and any military movement was known to them. That would mean that you'd have to believe that Iran, who expressed, profusely that they didn't want war, actually did, and decided that they didn't want to be seen as the instigators. They wanted to be seen as the victim, and therefore attacked themselves coincidentally, precisely at the same time Israel and the United States began attacking them. Like, you're expected to believe that the false flag operation was committed almost in synchronicity with the US and Israeli attacks, which Iran did not know about. Which would be, coincidence of the fucking century, obviously. So she wants you to believe this, that Iran decided to commit a false flag against itself prior to knowing that Israel and the United States was going to attack them around the same time. And you also have to believe that Iran thinks everybody in the world is so stupid that they would have to kill 161 plus of their own school children in order to make you believe that Israel and the United States are evil enough to kill children in a school they bomb, after Israel has spent 2.5 years almost doing that very thing, visibly, observably, for us all to see. Like, you're asking a lot for us to dance around with that bullshit. Because first of all, it would not be surprising to anybody at this point, right? Even the naysayers, even the ones who deny the genocide in Gaza, it would not be surprising to anyone at all that the USA and Israel are capable of bombing a school full of children. They've been doing that for 2 years that I know of, at least, which I've seen with my own eyes. But it's been done in Iraq, it's been done in Afghanistan, it's been done in Yemen, Syria, right, Libya. I mean, I could go on and on. The Americans have bombed civilians and lots of children, right? Throughout the last 50 years, they've probably killed a couple of million of children. And so that isn't surprising to us if they bomb a school, especially under somebody who's accused of the crimes he's accused of against children already, right? We know American leadership and the elites who run it have no regard for the safety of children because they're all in those files. You know those files, right? So it's impossible to believe Iran did this to themselves. There's no possible framework where that makes any sense. So we can tell it's propaganda. There is only two options of who it actually was who bombed that school in Manab in Iran. And it is the USA or Israel. Literally, because at the time those children were killed, Israel and the United States were bragging about this preemptive surprise attack while it was happening. It doesn't take a genius to figure these things out. In fact, the smartest dumb person can figure this out. It's so easy. It's so easy to see and understand and know that if you're someone who doubts it and disagrees with it and just cannot, trust your eyes anymore because it's there in black and white, well then you're either evil and are subduing your own eyesight, subduing the things that you see with your own eyes to be observably true, so as you can maintain your hatred towards certain groups of people and bloodlust. Or the second thing, you are just way too dumb, like way too dumb, so uneducated, so incapacitated mentally that you cannot figure basic things out. It just feels like those are the only ways we can really put this. Either you're that dumb or that evil that this isn't something you care to attempt to decipher with just basic logic. And on those points of propaganda, I mean, isn't it strange? Isn't it strange how a woman can stand there telling lies, blatant, bold-faced lies, and prevaricating, and trying to distract and redirect conversation, not actually answer the question directly, and try to reframe it, repurpose it, and move towards something that seems to benefit her overlord, right? The orange guy. It's strange. While the word truth is plastered across the screen, it is, for me, somebody who actually studies propaganda, somebody who actually has, above all else in my life, been more interested in human behavior and agnotology, the study of ignorance, as it relates to propaganda, more than probably anything in my life except my child, right? I love my child more than that in the world, and I love my family. And then I love this investing time in understanding this stuff, the madness of crowds, the cult mentality, the brainwashing of people, the way the human mind succumbs to suggestion, how susceptible it is to that kind of stuff. And so for me, this one clip really just went like it hit me, right? It hit me, and I was like, shit. That's one of the most blatant displays of propaganda I've ever seen in my life. Like, of irony and I suppose you could say satire, because if I didn't know better, I would see that video that I showed you as like satire, as like a parody, like it belonged in a movie like Idiocracy, right? Which is what I believe we actually live in right now. I mean, Melania Trump headed the UN Council the other day, and I mean, look, I'm not somebody who will stereotype a model as being stupid. Of course, there are plenty of models who are extremely intelligent, way more than I could ever hope to be, perhaps. And but I know Melania isn't. I know for a fact Melania is not there. She came from Yugoslavia, right? Slovenia now, but she came from Yugoslavia. She was born in the 70s. She came to America, became a model quite quickly, and basically spent the rest of her life hanging around rich billionaires, rich men at least, worming her way into that scene and befriending them, including J.E. She's mentioned in those files too, not just as per, the orange guy's mistress or wife or whatever, but she's mentioned as being a friend of J.E. and Ghislaine, wherever the fuck you call her. I've drifted a little bit, I understand. Your point is just, this is all connected. It's all one big thing, right? I mean, and at this point, if you don't see that the USA and Israel are the bad guys, at this point, it's because you're a bad guy too. It is. Plain and simple, factually, irrefutably, it is because you are a bad guy too. Or, as I said, you're just too fucking dumb. Too dumb to really comprehend what you're seeing, even though it's quite simple and obvious at this point. Look, just to further my point about how much of a lie Levitt is spewing, their talking points are that Iran has probably got nukes. They don't. It's never been proven that they have a stockpile of munitions, nuclear munitions, that are any kind of threat to the world. Prior to this war beginning, Iran, actually the day before, Iran agreed with Kushner and Huckabee that they would stop stockpiling enriched uranium, which makes it impossible to build a bomb. So in that same breath, they're saying they don't even have one. And Netanyahu's been trying to push for this war for decades now, since the early 90s. And every time he said, Iran are seconds away from having nuclear bombs. And so, a couple of 100 trillion seconds have passed, I believe, since he began saying that. More than 30 years. And nothing. Absolutely nothing. Every time he said they were inching closer to building a bomb, it took another few years before it was confirmed they didn't. They don't have bombs. Nukes, that is. So that's a lie. That's a blatant falsity. The other talking point is, Iran killed over 40,000 of their own people in protests. That is a blatant lie. Google it, find wherever you can. There is absolutely zero proof. There is literally just the anecdotal evidence of people saying we think there's about 40,000, 30,000 people dead. Now, I was no fan of the Ayatollah. I was no fan of Iran's regime in general, but they're a sovereign nation. What we think of them shouldn't be a dictating factor in how they conduct themselves. I don't want to see human rights abuses, but that's for, obviously, international courts, international humanitarian law. People should be trying to get to Iran through those diplomatic means in order to curtail those abuses, instead of creating war, which ends up killing lots of people. So they say that Iran killed all these people. They didn't. Now it's likely they probably killed a couple of hundred, right? It's likely. It's likely that two, which Iran claimed, and again, I don't fully have to believe in Iran either, but I see some merit in this, that they arrested Mossad agents who were seen shooting at protesters in order to instigate gunfire or violence. So lots of the deaths can be attributed to outside influence, attempting to create pandemonium in order to further make their story about Iran being so evil and heinous a little bit more believable, right, than it already was. So there is really no pretext here which makes any sense for this war to occur except Israeli expansionism, and that the USA is dragged into it because the orange guy in charge of the USA is beholden to Israel for some reason, which I believe perhaps is related to some videos they might have of him with little kids. When you take all this into account, you end up seeing the big picture here. Iran was willing to negotiate. It had believed itself that it came to a deal in which it would not enrich uranium and it would not stockpile enriched uranium. Its nuclearization program is basically to do with energy efficiency in its own country, right? So it does not have the nuclear capability currently to create a nuclear weapons arsenal. And it never had. And this is, I mean, look it up. It's exactly the same circumstance right now, what we're seeing. The stuff that's being peddled in the media, right? The lies we're seeing, the Iran has nukes bullshit, right? Especially from the Israeli propaganda side, right? It's the same exact thing as what happened with Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction. Saddam is going to blow the entire world up. It's the same playbook. It's the same exact storyline. It's the same exact plot. It's the same bullshit. It's just completely and utterly the same. And it speaks volumes that Americans, so many millions of Americans, are falling for it again so easily. And maybe it's not that they're being duped. Maybe it's just that the Americans who are, delighting in this current war don't actually care about the reasoning. They're just happy to see Arabs being slaughtered. And that makes more sense in my head. That's how deranged and sick of a society the United States is, and Israel. Because it does speak volumes that they're falling for it a second time. Fool me once, that saying. It just, I cannot believe, well, no, I do. I believe they're that stupid. I do. At least half of America is that fucking stupid, right? But I don't think it's that they're just being duped and that the propaganda is working that well. I think what's really happening is that the propaganda worked at a lower level in a better way by introducing, that racist idea of hating Islam so much, and the demonization of Islam as this sort of oppositional ideology between, a war between gods kind of thing. I think the American people who support this war hate Islam so much that they actually are just delighted to see the children even of Muslims born and be dismembered by bombs. That's what I believe. I don't think they're really concerned at all with the reasoning for the war, which is itself a shame, okay? Because that just means that the propaganda is so potent that hate rules that society, probably more than anything else does. Hate and fear. And nobody really wants to do any, due diligence and look any of this up. They just want to go along with it. They don't care if there's weapons of mass destruction. And it's basically proven that there isn't, right, in Iran. Just like it was proven that there were none in Iraq. And that whole debacle was just complete and utter nonsense just to go kill some Arabs. Accounting for morality and the things I believe are evil or not evil, right? You can paint this picture really easily. Who has killed more children by bombardment, dismembering children, right? Putting thousands of children in a position where their leg was blown off and they lived long enough to see their fucking leg over the other side of the room as they bled out. That happened to hundreds of children in Gaza. So in the last 3 years, 2.5 years, who killed the most children? Answer, Israel. With American bombs that American taxpayers gifted Israel, basically. Who has aided and abetted the mass murder of more children than any other nation on earth in the last 2.5 years? The USA. Whose corporate network, global network, is responsible for more deprivation and poverty and the siphoning of resources away from the people who really need them than any other nation on earth in the last 50 years? The USA. Who is systematically terrorizing children right now as we speak when there's supposed to be a ceasefire in Gaza? Who's bombing every other country, left, right and centre in the Middle East and claiming they're the victims? Israel. Whichever bad thing you can think of, especially the bombardment, the carpet bombing of millions of children, well, at least over 1 million of children in Gaza, who starves children, who obstructs aid to children, who stops baby formula from going into starving babies, who all have died either of malnutrition or who stops general supplies going in to keep children warm. And so far we've seen so many little babies die of hypothermia in Gaza. All of that is Israel. Israel, the United States, and many other countries in Europe, including and particularly the UK and Germany, have all aided and abetted the single most heinous crime we've seen in the last, since World War II actually, right? And that's a fact. There are over 60,000 children dead or missing, at least, and that's a reserve number. That's like a low estimate. In Gaza, killed by Israel with American artillery, American-made artillery, and weapons systems guided by Microsoft and Palantir, American companies, Zionist-owned American companies, by the way. They did all of that. They did all of those things. There are 60,000 children limbless and dead in Gaza. 60,000 children. Nobody can dispute that. Even the IDF themselves have admitted that that's probably the number, right? They did that. Iran, as far as I can tell, is a theocratic regime whose rules aren't exactly aligned with the kind of humanitarian ideology I subscribe to. And that's about the worst crime I can think of that they've done, right? Like, if you're American and you believe it's so insane that women can't show their faces, that you need to go in and bomb all their children, then there's something wrong with you. Not Iranian women or their somewhat seemingly oppressive theocracy of Iran. And Iran haven't killed thousands of people all over the world in the last 3 years. Especially they haven't killed thousands of children at all. Now, in their recent attacks against Tel Aviv, I found out that they killed 2 children, a 16 and 15-year-old. And that is awful. It is fucking disgusting. But that is nowhere near as despicable as what we've seen the USA and Israel do to children, primarily, over the last 2 years. So again, when we boil it down, right, we have Iran, likely oppressive regime, isn't exactly the most free state in the world. It functions as a theocracy, which isn't illegal, by the way, but as far as I'm concerned, is oppressive by nature. But that's my opinion. Its human rights violations include how it treats its own people. There is no evidence that they have killed scores of children over the last 2.5 years. There's no evidence that they've killed any child whatsoever, actually, in any kind of military incursion or bombardment or any kind of systematic abuse within their own nation. There's no evidence of any of that. There's no evidence that they've killed any civilians elsewhere in the world. They haven't invaded anybody. They haven't bombed anybody. They haven't done any of that kind of shit that Israel and the USA have been doing for the last 2.5 years until now, right? In retaliation to being attacked, they responded with bombs. And they, as far as all of the proof can tell, is they've attacked military targets. They have specifically bombed military targets and not bombed innocent people. And only the bombings that they did kill civilians in could be classified as collateral, the way Israel tries to pretend their bombings are. Because Israel built its military installations amongst civilian infrastructure, which is intentional. It's using their own people as human shields. But as far as we know, I think there are something like between 6 to 12 deaths in Israel from Iranian bombardment. And 2 of those were children, as I mentioned, a 15 and 16-year-old. But that bomb had hit a military target. And on the other side of that, a lot of their bombs are deflected by the Iron Dome, but aren't intercepted. They're deflected and they land somewhere in Israel and kill civilians, which technically, if you want to go down that route, could not be attributed to Iran. Iran launched a bomb. It was intended for a military target. It was deflected by the Iron Dome and it went and hit a civilian property. Bad, horrid, yes, but not the fault of the targeting system. Now, we can go back and forth about this all day and we can debate it all we want about what is and isn't true, but the reality is, and the real truth and the fact of the matter is that on one hand, we have the idea that yes, Iran has been responsible for human rights abuses. It is seemingly oppressive as a theocratic state, but it has not killed thousands of children. It hasn't even killed one, as far as we know of, outside of its response attacks to Israel. It has not invaded any country or bombed any country prior to being attacked, right? On the other hand, we have Israel, who we know for a fact has killed hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza. That's the real figure, if you account for direct and indirect military action and political action, right? Stuff like blocking aid results in deaths. Something like creating the circumstances by which their region is uninhabitable and they haven't got the supplies to sustain themselves in such an inhospitable environment, you'll get indirect deaths, right? So overall, they've killed around a couple of 100,000 people, including hundreds of thousands of children in Gaza. We know that's a fact. It's indisputable, right? Whether you want to say it's collateral or not, that's up to you, but that's a fact. We know what they did there. We know that they killed over 60,000 children in direct military action, bombardments, right? This means delimbing and decapitating children with bombs and burning them alive. They've done that to thousands of children over the last 2.5 years. That is indisputable. Even Israel admits that now because they cannot hide it, right? They did that with the USA's help. They did that with the USA's taxpayer paid for bombs, right? They did that with the billions of dollars gifted to them by the USA. They also did that with the help of the UK, Germany, Canada, Australia, Italy, plenty more. They also did that with unilateral protection and cover by the Western media, right? The Western media apparatus enabled Israel to commit these crimes, right? They're complicit as much as the USA is in giving the bombs. And this Western media apparatus is so big and powerful, so much money is pumped into it, that it couldn't be anything but propaganda. It helped to spread messages that were so insanely untrue that even the slightest logical analysis made it completely laughable. Right away. Laughable. When we factor all these things in, right, especially when you consider how many places Israel bombed prior to bombing Iran with the USA, and how many places the USA invades, and how many military bases the USA just has all over the world, right? And how many military installations they've set up in terms of wanting to invade or put the pressure of fear on certain countries around the world, especially for their drive for resource theft and oil. When you factor all this stuff in, you cannot but come out with the conclusion that despite their off-putting, nuanced ideological tendencies in how they run their sovereign nation, Iran actually is the good guy, comparatively. Like, you couldn't come out with any conclusion other than that. I mean, think about this very fact. Let's take out the nuclear threat talking point, right? Both the USA and Israel are saying, we're going into Iran to free the people of Iran. And there's all this rhetoric all over the media and online about how we want to see a free Iran. They don't want to see a free Palestine, but they want to see a free Iran for some reason. This is the major talking point we see now. They want to free them. But tell me, explain to me, how do you free people by blowing up their children? How do you free people with bombs? Do you go in there? Do you bomb only the people that you believe are loyal to the regime? Or are you just carpet bombing the place and hoping you don't hit the people who want to be free from the regime? It doesn't make any sense. Whichever way you play it, it makes no sense. Logical people understand this. Smart people don't avoid this. Good people don't delight in war. I mean, is that the American agenda? Think about it. We want to save the Iranian people by bombing the Iranian people. We want to make sure that Iranian children don't grow up to be oppressed by making sure that they don't grow up. None of it makes sense. And you know it doesn't. You know it doesn't. And that's the thing that hurts me the most. We all know what I'm talking about. We all know what I'm saying is true. We all do. But some people are so filled with hate that they will actually excuse war. That they will see the killing of a child as wrong in one context, but not in another. They can be convinced to be inflicted with that cognitive dissonance, right? Like, if any man in your hometown killed a child, you'd want to hang him, right? But if one man orders the mass murder of 20,000 children in this little region where you don't live and you don't know anything about, it's fine. And that's the thinking. That's the thinking so many of you have. You look at the word collateral damage and you say, it's okay. I know 20,000 children had their legs and arms blown off and their heads blown off. They were burned alive or liquidated by giant explosions. But it's okay, because it's just war. It's just war. And when you fall for something like that, you're vile. You're vile because your ignorance then is not just stupidity. It's not just not knowing. It's complicity. It's giving consent to evil And I can't accept your ignorance as a good excuse to be okay with stuff like that. I just can't. And nobody should. We live in a world now where the world of information is at your fingertips. I can find anything out that I want to find out right now on this phone. I can look at how people live in places I've never been to, places I'll probably never go. And I can find out about how they are, who they are, what they believe in. And when you can do something like that, ignorance no longer works as an excuse. Because the media can tell me that, say, people in Japan are awful. But all I have to do is go look at people in Japan. Right? I go online here, I talk to somebody from Japan, I go look at Japanese culture videos, I go look at, Japanese history, things I want to find out about how their culture evolved and became what it is today. I can find all this out. I don't have to believe what I'm told from people not really in that sphere, in that scope, right? And I think fundamentally, how you learn to curtail propaganda is when you look at someone like Karoline Levitt talk to you and say stuff like she's saying, and the word truth is plastered across the screen at the bottom. Take what she says, bring it into Google, bring it into Instagram, bring it into whatever avenue of search you can, and find out for yourself if what she's saying holds any merit. And I think more than that, to go into watching stuff like that with a preemptive suspicion of authority. And that's really where you make it difficult for them to get you with this nonsense propaganda. That's where you get it, because if you have a healthy general disdain for authoritative figures, you might be okay. I hope that example of propaganda that I showed you sticks with you, because it works like that. Now, I personally am suspect of everything I see in any media, especially mainstream media, right? And don't fool yourself, by the way. Mainstream media is not Fox News or CNN. Mainstream media is Facebook. Mainstream media is Instagram. Mainstream media is all those social media apps, because nobody really gets their news from just news channels anymore on the TV. Most people regurgitate and repeat and disseminate the shit they see in a fucking meme more than they ever will spread, disseminate shit they see on a TV screen, right? Most people aren't learning what they're believing from Fox News anymore, or CNN anymore, or Sky News, or BBC, or RT, like where I'm from. Most people are believing the 10-second videos that are pushed out through social media. Mainstream simply means the one most watched, the one with the biggest audience. And that definitely is not your news channels anymore. It's your fucking phone, your mobile phone in your hand. That's where you're getting your news. So again, if somebody's telling you something and the word truth is plastered on the screen, or they're telling you something that you know logistically doesn't make sense, or that you sense doesn't logistically make sense, then go investigate, check it out. I'm not telling you to be a researcher or to somehow gain a hold on the nature of politics, or try to learn in 10 seconds the history of politics or the history of philosophy. But just check things. Just check. Don't assume that it's just true because it's on the screen or on the TV.